Monica Charette, and this is Holding the Light.
As long as you love, I will whisper in your ear, little whispers you will hear. As long as you love.
When a horrific car accident suddenly claimed the lives of both her teenage son and her husband, Susan Cloutier had to dig deep to want to keep living. She shares her story of losing half of her family in an instant, parenting her angry and deeply grieving 11-year-old son, finding love again, even contemplating ending her own life, and through it all, leaning into her faith to move forward with love and purpose. Today, Colby and I are honored to hold the light with Susan Cloutier. Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for joining us. And even though we are seeing one another today for the first time, I feel like I know you because, as it happens in Maine communities, I remember when I learned about your family's tragedy just 2 months after Cassidy had died. And I was, of course, deep in my own grief, but I remember feeling so devastated and helpless. Not only did you lose your 14-year-old son, Casey, in that terrible accident, but it also claimed your husband, Gus, at the same time. A loss some would imagine is just unsurvivable. And yet, here you are, and we are. And are you surprised by the time lapse? Or does it feel like it all just happened yesterday?
It's about probably 50-50.
Depending on the day.
Depending on the day, absolutely. Next month will be 9 years. It was 9 years for you last month. Time has gone fast. Time has gone slow. Wish we could stop time to be able to memorialize and not forget the memories.
Yeah. And sometimes go back in time so you could relive it all again, right?
Not that day, but yes.
Right. But your time with your family. I really want to know all your story of survival, but before we talk about all of that, for our listeners, if you can, take us back to the day that changed your life forever.
So we had a very active life. Casey being 14, Chase being 11, both boys heavily involved in hockey, travel hockey. Casey at the time had just started school that August with St. Dom's. He was previously in Winthrop, so he became a freshman at St. Dom's in August. So that particular morning, it was a Tuesday morning, the kids were on school break. It was December 30th, 2014. Casey was to meet the school bus over in Auburn at St. Dom's because the hockey team was taking the bus down to Falmouth because they had a winter Christmas hockey tournament. So Gus was taking him over in his car. I had to get ready and I had to go to work. I remember telling Gus just before I left, he had gotten a new sweatshirt from my brother. And I just told him, hey, look, you really look good in that sweatshirt. That color is really good on you. And Casey said, Mom, my tie, the red one that I want to wear is in the Pilot, my Honda Pilot. I said, okay. And then I made sure that I put the tie in the car for him before we left. And I hollered into him. I said, Casey, your tie is in the car. And it was goodbye. I went into work. There was something I needed to tell Gus. And it wasn't and I don't remember what it was that I needed to tell him. And I remember calling his cell phone and calling and no answer. So my son Chase was home and he got a phone call from Casey's hockey coach and said, hey, is Casey going to be coming to the tournament? You know, we're waiting for him on the bus and we can't wait too much longer. So that was actually a message he left on the answer machine. And Chase called me at work and said, hey, Mom, coach is looking for Casey. And it's like, Okay. So I asked Chase to give me his phone number. So I called Coach and I said, Casey was supposed to be there. They left him plenty of time. And I didn't know what to do. And he says, why don't you call your local police department and see if there's been any accidents? So that I did. I called the local police department and they said, yes, there had been an accident. They didn't tell me any details, but they did say, how about going home? We'd like you to go home and wait for us there. And I called the coach back, and then he said, well, why don't you call the hospital? So I called the hospital, and they said there had only been one individual that had been brought in, and it was an older gentleman. So I left work. I went home. I picked up Chase, and we headed on Route 202 going towards Lewiston. And I remember telling Chase, I said, buddy, this might not be something that's going to have a good outcome. And I said, I'm worried. And I drove up and I could see emergency vehicles in the road. I pulled off on the side of the road. I parked my car in a parking lot. I started walking up to one of the fire trucks that was there. And I said, that's my husband's car. I said, my husband and son are in that car. And he said, no, ma'am, it's a woman and her son. I said, no, that's my husband and my son. And then the investigating officer the senior investigating officer on this team at the time, a sergeant with the Androscoggin County Sheriff's Department, walked up to me. And I said, that's my husband's car. My husband and my son are in that car. And I said, did they make it? And he said, no, there's no survivors in that vehicle. And that's how I found out. I'm just the stubborn person that I am, and the person who needs immediate answers. I had to know, I had to see for myself. I didn't go to the vehicle. I didn't walk up to the vehicle. They wouldn't have let me anyway. So he walked me back to my vehicle. I told Chase, I said, Dad, in case he didn't make it. Of course, a blubbering idiot that I was. And he took my telephone and he called family for me. And family started showing up. And so that's how the first part of that whole situation went down. We drove back to my house. I remember when I'm in stress and when I'm in stress mode, I clean. I started putting dishes away. I started picking up the house. People started filtering in. A friend in town, God bless her heart, she started bringing in water. She started organizing people to come, and drop off some food or whatever. And obviously that was the last thing in my mind that I wanted to do was to eat. But she said, you're not going to feel like eating. You got to drink. You got to take care of yourself.
Thank goodness for those people, right?
Thank goodness for those people. And I swear 50 people must have showed up throughout that day, just filtering in and out, offering their condolences. What can we do? What can we do? They were shoveling my driveway. Then they were sanding my driveway, bringing food. It was crazy how that all went down.
Yeah, communities really rally, especially Maine communities. I imagine it happens elsewhere, but certainly feels that way in Maine.
Right. And we live in Winthrop is such a small community, but Casey, he went to Winthrop and he also went to St. Dom's. So it affected that community over there too. Whether, the alumni, we had alumni reaching out, the current schools, the kids in the school, the teachers, the parents of the kids, the whole, and then the whole hockey community around the state. He played travel. I mean, he was all over the state, even the high schools out of state, they just, they hear something like that happens to their brother, and they come together too. So, the days leading up to it, that particular weekend, Chase was supposed to have a hockey tournament in New Hampshire, and we went. One of my girlfriends drove me down, and it was very, very difficult, but I had another mother that came up to me and said, "Hey, I lost my son. He was a goalie on a hockey team." And she says, "There's nothing I can tell you right now," but she says, "Things do get easier over time."
How did that
And
make you feel then? Like when she said that to you?
I would say, "Yeah, I'm glad you're telling me your story, but
Mm.
you know,
Had a very
uh,
similar experience, wondering like, you're not me right now.
yeah, right, right." And I said, "I'm sorry for your loss," but I was numb. I was just totally numb. And I stayed numb for a very long time. And the funeral, um, you had to put on a show. Uh, there was a lot of people there. The bishop, Bishop Dealey from the Diocese of Portland, conducted the funeral service along with 4 other priests. Um, and the church was standing room only. And I felt like you have to be there for those people. As hard as it is on you, you have to show them that you're okay. And it's very draining, very, very draining.
You had to show up for your other son too, right?
Had to show up for my other son, for Chase. And he was so stoic through everything. Um, he, I never, witnessed him break down during this whole time. I never witnessed him shed a tear until one day, one evening, I don't know, probably a month or so out, I dropped to the floor in the kitchen and I just I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop crying. That's when I saw him cry. And it was for me. I know it was, because he didn't know how to help. He didn't know what to do.
It must be hard for a child to see their parent in so much pain.
Right.
Yeah, it absolutely is one of the hardest aspects of sibling loss is, witnessing your parents and going through their grief. And it sounds like like you said, he was very stoic initially, but what was his journey like in the 9 years since the accident?
Very rough. Very, very rough. We tried to keep the norm. We tried to keep the norm going. We'd go to his karate classes. We'd go to his hockey, his games, his tournaments, his practices. Wasn't even a month out from the accident, and his karate dojo was having a special tournament per se, and it was on a cruise. So it was Martin Luther King weekend, or Martin Luther King week in January. His dojo, they said, "Look, we're going to take you with us." So a change of scenery absolutely was good for me. I didn't want to come back, and he enjoyed himself. Not sure he wanted to come back, but we got away. Don't know if it was the right choice at the time, because when you come back, it's, you think you're running away and you're not. You're only coming back to everything. But throughout the years, it's been very difficult with him. It was about the age of 13, starting going through puberty, adolescence, that he really started having his I don't know if I want to call them emotional issues, but it's definitely anger, a lot of anger. He was lashing out. He was getting in trouble with the law. Nothing major. I mean, no, I can't say it's nothing major. He assaulted me. He got arrested for that. He was sneaking out at night. He got picked up by the police. They had to bring him home because he was out past curfew. He ran into some issues, and he started smoking marijuana, and he was drinking. And people had said to me right after the accident, "You got to get him into counseling. You got to get him into counseling." And he didn't want to go to counseling. And that, I think, is one of my mistakes. Don't push it. Don't force it if they're not ready to go. You think you're doing good, but in my situation, I think it just made him more angry and more resentful towards me for making him do something like this that he didn't want to do. He said that he was dealing with Gus and Casey's death as if Dad and Casey are away at a hockey tournament. They would often go away together, and they'd go in one direction, we'd go another direction, and that's how he felt about them being gone.
Witnessing your son experience his grief through these different, mechanisms, whether it be, using different substances or, bouts of anger or violence in some cases, how did that affect you as a parent? And I ask you that, just fully understanding that a lot of times the way in which we express grief or experience it, it's sometimes, variable, and you have no control over it as a parent or a friend or even a counselor. Sometimes you can aid, people going through those experiences and give them tools. But honestly, to some extent, it's sort of it comes down to who the person is and how they experience it. It can be totally random. So I hope, you don't take any personal responsibility or too much responsibility for the ways in which he was experiencing this grief.
Well, as being a single parent, you think what you're doing is right, and you think that you use your best judgment. I was at a breaking point where I had my suicide note written. I was ready to end it. We had an episode one day in May in 2018, and he spit on me. He was punching holes in the wall. He was breaking items, and I said, okay, this is it. And I, took some pills. That wasn't the way that I had intended to take myself out. But because I had been contemplating it for a while, I said, my husband's dead, my son is dead, and now this one that is left hates my guts. And what do you do about it? Well, the easiest thing for me to do is to just leave. So I had remarried at the time, and so that was probably also one of an anger trigger for Chase too. He didn't want me to get remarried. I think he felt that this gentleman walking into our lives was taking his place as being the head of the household, and he had said that a few times. This is my house, not yours. So out of my husband's fear, he called my best friend and her husband, and they came, and she convinced me to go to St. Mary's in Lewiston. So I went there for psychiatric treatment for a little over a week. I came home. But while I was there, the psychiatrist said, you cannot have any more. You got to get your kid out of the house. You got to get him out. It's not good for you. And it was a few weeks later, actually June 13th, that I had a transport company come and take him to an alternative school. And they transported him first to one location in Maine that had I read better into recommendations of sending your child to an alternative school, they say don't send them to the state that you live in because they'll try to run. And that's exactly what happened. He tried to run, and they said we can't keep him. So he actually had to go to a lockdown facility, and another transportation company came, picked him up, and off he went to Utah, where he got counseling. It was a locked facility. He got counseling, but they did a load of stuff with him. It really was, he got there, it's like almost like prison or boot camp. They shaved his head. It's one of those situations. You have to wear a uniform in school, which is no big deal because he kind of wore a uniform when he went to St. Dom's too. So he was kind of used to that. But they did a lot of stuff with him. it was all boys. It was men taking care of the boys. He went to Alaska twice fishing. He got a dog. He did dog trials. He came back a different person. He came back a different person. And I'm not saying it's been a smooth road since, but he's matured. Things are gotten better. He graduated high school. He took a gap year to go to school, to work, so he could save money for school. Now he's going to Southern Maine Community College, and going for agriculture.
Wow.
So, his hopes are, he'll get his 2-year degree and then either transfer to UMaine or another school to continue on. And so that's where he lies. He still has his anger issues, but I'm thinking it's more as an adolescent, not an adolescence, but a 20-year-old who doesn't want to live at home anymore, but doesn't have an option. He's independent, always been independent. So that's where he is now.
Yeah, I just want to say, let's not forget that he lost his brother and his father and his mother in this accident.
He did. He lost his best friend, and him and his brother, they fought. One would irritate the other, and the other would counteract, and then it would turn into a brawl. But in the end, they were best friends, and Casey would go to the end of the world to protect Chase, and Chase knew that. And then as far as Gus goes, Gus and Chase were so much alike in mannerisms, their personalities, where Casey and I were the comparison of each other, both of us are very extroverted, but I will say I turned very introverted after the accident happened. I didn't want to go to the grocery store. If I had to go to Walmart, it was 6 months or more before I could even get up the nerve to walk into Walmart. And before, where I could have been there an hour, I had to be out in 10 minutes. I just couldn't stand it. Just couldn't stand it.
There are so many grieving parents right now listening, shaking their head like, yes, I understand that.
Absolutely. And the physical, it's not just the mental aspect of it. The physical aspect of it took a toll. I mean, my memory was awful. I constantly shook. My hands were shaking. I couldn't even punch the number in on my rewards card, for when you at the checkout register. It was crazy. The physical, what grief does to you physically and mentally, it's unexplainable.
It is. I want to ask you something too before you remarried, because the conversations we have about child loss with parents have included how parents grieve together, because your partner is really like the only person who could possibly begin to understand what it feels like to lose your child. And I'm just really curious what that was like for you, not to have your partner with you to process your grief.
I had the loss of my parents. And when my dad died, that was the worst day of my life. And I had my husband there to help me through that. And then my mom died, and then his dad died, and we had each other. My best friend was gone. I didn't have him to turn to. And so I had to turn to friends. But it wasn't the same.
Of course not. I'm so sorry for that.
Yeah, it just wasn't. And I tried not to involve Chase too much in it, but he was there. He was my sounding board, and that is a lot of pressure, and to put on an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old. And do I feel guilty about that? had hindsight been 2020, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't have recommended that. I think that hurt him too. Even though he was there for me. I always told him he was my rock. And he was, but it was unfair to him.
And how did you separate and process, be able to carry the heavy grief and have for your husband, and also the grief that you have for your child? Were they different? Are there days when you grieve more for one than the other?
Absolutely. I would grieve for them both. I would grieve for Casey. Then I was guilty because I was grieving more for Casey than I was for Gus.
Oh my gosh, so complicated.
It is very complicated. But I mean, it got better, over time. I can say that I think it was 2 years had passed before I felt like I could breathe again. It took that long before, it was about 10 months before I had before I could chuckle and laugh. And then we had to, celebrate the holidays. We didn't celebrate the holidays. I told Chase, I said, I don't want to be here. And so we took a trip, and we took a trip to a country that didn't celebrate Christmas. That was good. Even though we had traveled a couple of other times since the death, that was a release. Going somewhere where there was no pressure, where nobody knew you, nobody knew your story, nobody could contact you because you were so far away. And then we came back.
I always find it so interesting what people do to protect themselves in these situations. There's no right or wrong.
No, there isn't. And that's, holidays and birthdays. And Gus was born on June 14th, and it was not planned, but Casey was born on June 14th too.
That's amazing.
I told the doctor when I was in labor, I didn't tell the doctor, I told Gus, he was standing to the side. I said, I'm sorry I didn't get you a birthday present. And she said to me, why, is it his birthday? And I said, yeah. She says, well, you're going to have a baby for your birthday. So
the greatest gift.
A great gift. And, that being my wedding to my husband, to Gus, was the happiest day of my life. Giving birth to Casey was the second best day of my life. And nothing can take that away. Nothing will take those memories.
Not to get sidelined too much, but when the cause of death involves legal matters as a result of an accident, it really compounds your grief, as we know, and extends your healing process. Can you tell us about that? I know Chase came to some of your proceedings and stood beside you.
He did. So the gentleman that caused the accident was a state of Maine employee on state work time. He crossed the center line. State immediately took responsibility for that action. However, still, there's a lot of investigations that had to go on. And because the state of Maine made payment to me, but the way the state of Maine law is written, they only have a cap at a certain level. It doesn't matter how many people were involved in an accident, how many lives were lost in an accident, they cap it. But in the legislature rules, you can petition for additional monies. So I knew that, $450,000 wasn't going to make up for, obviously, the loss of my husband and my son, but Gus's income. What am I going to, he had a 401k, et cetera, and we had life insurance, but that wasn't going to get me through, in my opinion. So I did petition state government. I contacted my representative. He agreed to write a bill and to get me additional funding. I met with the governor, and I had to speak before the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee to do what I felt was right and what was just and what was fair to me and to Chase. Chase, has the right to go to St. Dominic's Academy. but how are we going to afford to do this? I can't, treat one more than, one better than over the other. You can't play favorites in that. And yes, Casey's gone, but Chase should have that opportunity to go too. And so we met with them, and then later on down the road, the budget was, they're at the last minute trying to pass a budget like the legislature's always doing. And I got a call at 1:30 in the morning from my state representative saying that the bill passed unanimously in the House and in the Senate. And that was in 2017. So here we are, 2014, 15, 16, 17, and it's still going on. But it didn't end there. We got the additional funding, and then the gentleman that caused the accident, he went up for his license because I asked it to be revoked. I said that he shouldn't have been driving. He shouldn't be driving. He fell asleep at the wheel. I knew that they released the type of medications that he was taking, and one of the medications he was taking was to treat narcolepsy. So, but they said an accident's an accident, and there's nothing we can do about that. He's going to keep his license. So he won that battle, but he turned around and he sued my husband's estate. Knock on the door. I went outside one day, and it's a sheriff's officer, serves me with papers. And what are you going to do? I said, I swore a little. I got mad. I had a few choice words for him. But there's nothing I could do. That's the way the law is. He had every right to do what he had, to sue. He didn't sue my estate, but he sued what he was looking for, what was left of the insurance from the car insurance. And rather than pursue that, I chose to settle to get everything closed. So that was, 2018 by the time was done, 4 years before everything was done and finalized.
And that just makes all your grief resurfaced again and again.
It does. And it's, where I didn't feel anger about the accident, I knew it was an accident. What I took from the service was that Father Nate March said, God did not want this to happen. It was an accident. And that's how I had to relive. I had to keep taking that, thinking about that, and over and over and saying, this was an accident. There's accidents that happen every day. I mean, everybody has something that happens that's uncontrollable. So I wasn't mad. I mean, my faith is very, very important to me. I wasn't mad at the gentleman that caused the accident at that time. I was mad when he decided to sue us, but I wasn't mad at him at that time. So 4 years. And I thought at 2 years I could finally, take a breather, and I did, but it was like, okay, everything is done. 4 years, that's enough. But still, Chase was still a bugger. He was still with us he went at 14. Yeah. So at 11 years, he gets sent away at age 15. So.
And so where are you now? Where are you now in your grief, and where are you feeling in your family unit as you're healing?
One of the things that I know in my grief is that I don't discuss and talk about Gus and Casey like I used to. Every day it was Casey this or Casey that, or Gus this or Gus that. More Casey than Gus. And I would talk to Chase about that, and I think that probably could have been one of the reasons why he got so angry and lashed out, because even though he was gone, he was still a continuous presence in my mind. And artifacts still around the house, Casey's hockey stick was out, and even when we moved to a new home, it was his things were still there in presence. I still had, I'm not saying don't put the kids' pictures out, of them, but I didn't need to have his hockey stick standing in the corner, or I didn't need to have his hockey bag out, or his helmet. And it was the little things. And so those have been put away. As far as my grief stands now, yeah, it hurts. It hurts. Holidays aren't easy, but they're not anywhere near as difficult as they were.
I think a newly grieving parent would have some peace hearing that from you.
What is December 30th, 2024 going to be like for me? Might be more difficult, and I don't know why we, celebrate, year 1, year 5, year 10, year 15 differently than we would celebrate year 8, year 9, year 11. I mean, I don't know, but I think maybe that the 10th year is going to be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, we see it as not the marking of 10 years, but we're entering our 10th year.
Yeah.
And it's just so unbelievable to me. I didn't think I would live, a week.
Right.
And 10 years later, we are still here.
And even though it's been a long ride, it seems like it's been very short too, in a sense. It's gone by fast, but I think that's the healing process. That's moving forward. That's me making a new life for myself, starting to enjoy life again, getting older, looking forward to retirement. Yeah. So, and looking forward to Chase, starting his own life in his future.
What would you say you've learned about grief in the last 9 years that you would share with a newly bereaved parent?
Don't listen to what everybody around you has to say. It's your own time. It's your own feelings. Take care of yourself. Be mindful of, you still have to be mindful of what's going on around you, especially if you have younger children. You don't want them to be left out, because just like with Chase, he was with me every step of the way, for going to the hearings, going and meeting with the police. Everything. So don't let them fall behind, and don't say, hey, you're too young, you can't handle this type of thing. Let them participate. Whereas people were saying he doesn't, some people said he doesn't need to go with you. It's like, yeah, he does. So just trust your judgment, trust yourself, and be easy on yourself. Don't think that it's going to go away fast, because it won't.
Well, as is customary, we like to end our podcast giving you the opportunity to answer the question, how would you like us to remember your husband and your son?
As far as Gus goes, he was a funny guy, but not intentionally. He was French, and that was his first language. So many words got lost in translation. And he wouldn't know that he was being funny. And that's why a lot of people remember him as being unintentionally funny. He had the most beautiful blue eyes. That's the first thing that I saw in him when I met him. His eyes drew me in. But he was a stand-up father. He worked hard. He was a son, a brother, a good husband. And another thing about this is that Gus left behind his mom too. So she didn't only just lose her grandson, but she lost her son as well. And it was 5 months before I could get on the telephone and call her and talk to her. So Gus was a good guy. And Casey, his smile would light up a room. He was outgoing, very personable. He had friends. He just easily made friends. Outgoing, energetic. He wasn't the smartest, what do I want to say, or the brightest bulb. But he knew how to put a smile on everybody's face.
Well, thank you, Susan. I so truly admire you. It takes so much courage to come share this personal grief journey, and I know it will help others.
Yeah, and I just want to say I agree with my mother completely. You are such a courageous woman for not only advocating for your own rights following the accident. There's a saying in optometry school where it's not rare if it's in your chair, and so even though the tragedy that befell you is a 1 in a million, 1 in a billion chance, there might be another parent one day, and the legislation that you helped to pass is going to protect them in that instance, and so that's really amazing. And additionally, your love is just so evident for not only just Chase, but both of your sons, and the patience that you had and the perseverance that it took to continue to be a support system for Chase moving forward following the accident is just incredible. And I think the amazing man that he is becoming and slowly working towards being is because of that love and that patience.
As long as you love.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this podcast helpful, please share our link with others and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. I'm Monica Charette, reminding you that you are never alone in your grief. Until next time, we'll be right here with you, holding the light.
As long as you love. As long as you love.